hey, a mom, dad, you think I should, cut my hair?
Oh, yeah.
You know,
I remember I was taking it to us. And there was some. The emergency,
yes.
I know. Said, we're meeting at the police station. My key doesn't. I don't know if yours. I have a key.
No, we were in the park. No, it was Mountain View.
Oh, now, yeah.
Yeah.
We're getting all kinds of echo and I'm not sure how many places.
Seeker?
Okay.
All of a sudden, they.
I think-
I'm getting it from my phone.
Computer.
Oh, all right.
Computer up. Yes. And I looked at that in the deck,
Yeah.
and I thought back
Is that
to
better?
early grade school. And I'm seeing. If she was a brunette, who'd have known?
Yeah.
Okay, we're not getting feedback now.
Yeah, I wonder if we're getting any audio at all, but
Well, it's showing, since I have the mic, it's showing it as sending.
Oh, you have mousy brown hair, just like I used.
And no one remote is on, so it's hard to use them to test.
She's saying she's a
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
All right. I'm gonna call this meeting of the Los Altos Hams Amateur Radio Club to order. Yeah, well, that's good. They're probably having a better conversation. So, class, come to order.
Do we have to salute the flag?
No, not today. So, yeah, who's driving this? Who's driving this wondrous presentation?
I'm driving,
Okay,
but I think I need to be quick on it.
there you go.
Yep, there we go.
Super. So here's the, yeah, here's what we're going to be doing tonight. We've got some organizational stuff, which I'll be yakking about. And then Neil is going to give a tech talk, if you will, on basic repeater usage and the other topics you see here. And then we'll chat about future topics and have an open mic for anybody who wants to ask any questions or suggest anything. That's always good. I'll take next slide. So, organizational stuff. We do need to fill our officer and director roles. And I would like to vote on these next meeting, and I'd like to approve the bylaws next meeting. So that'll be in March. And so you can find the bylaws on the lahhams.com website. Neil has added a page now to that has the bylaws there. Right now, Neil and I are acting officers. I'm acting president. Neil's acting as the treasurer, secretary, and everything else. And Dave's acting as a director. So speaking for myself, if somebody wants to be president, I'm happy to hand that over. So I think any of the positions.
So he must have volunteered.
So anyway, I won't belabor that, but rubber's gonna meet the road in March. So I'm hoping folks would like to help organize the club, run the club. It is your club. So we'll be looking for that. And then basically, I think just an update that both the Los Altos Hills County Fire District as well as the town have agreed to fund the club because of our emergency function role. Yeah. So I'd like to thank the fire department, the fire district for tonight's pizza. And I'm sorry you guys aren't eating it, but I am enjoying it. And
You deserve it being the president.
that's right. Hey, John. So anyway, so that's the good news, is that the town is very supportive of us, and the Los Altos Hills County Fire District has come out to support the club as well. So that's the update there. Next slide, please. And just an update on activities. Last week, Neil hosted a drill on message passing, and then the Santa Clara County had a drill activating the EOCs. And so Neil walked us through the radio room and got us oriented with voice operations and packet operations for message passing. And we did participate as LAH for the drill, and that was a big thing. And then Drew sent me a note from the Big Sur International Marathon where they're looking for ham radio operators. So if you guys would like field experience, if you've done field work before, that's probably a good thing to go check out. Hopefully everyone's on the mailing list. Hopefully you saw the information come to you. The only downside is, well, the positive side is it's kind of Carmel, Monterey, Big Sur. The downside is the race. They want you there at 5 a.m. So you could have a night in Carmel before, but otherwise it's a long drive.
It's a beautiful area. Go early.
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially in the dark.
Pardon?
Especially,
in the dark.
Not in the dark. I've driven it. Yeah, not good.
yeah.
Go down the night before.
But yeah, so anyway, there's a call for help there if folks are interested. And then Los Altos is running a test of their GMRS system. And this is through Resilient Los Altos. This is on March 2nd. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to that, Neil.
Only that they asked if we were interested, because we've been doing over the last couple of years more and more joint stuff. So they would love to hear what their repeater coverage is for GMRS.
Oh.
And GMRS is what?
It's a, yep, go for it.
It's a different licensing. Used to be free, now it's not. But it's basically, you don't have to pass a test. You just have to pay a fee and you can buy a radio and TV. So the barrier is lower than.
Just out of curiosity.
Yep.
The radios from 25 years ago that were GMRS, do they work on those same frequencies or
They
is it
do.
a totally different thing?
So they changed the rules about 3 years ago, but all the old stuff still works. But GMRS now can have higher power and removable antennas and a few other things that they didn't used to be able to have. But you now need a $35 every 10 years license.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Some of us are retired.
Is there, maybe this is, if I may go on down this rabbit hole, it's interesting. Is there a difference here from ham to GMRS? Is this a looming, are there advantages to one or the other in terms of type of participation and emergency situations? Is the GMRS radio users gonna be as active, or what should we be thinking about that as a technology or as a licensing?
Can we
protocol?
save that for open mic? Because
Yes.
it's a good question.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, all right. So and that brings us to the last point on the organizational stuff. And that is, we're proposing to keep the same format, kind of starting at 6:30 with food and just a social side. Doesn't have to be pizza. I did name my favorite food groups in the first meeting, which of course were pizza and donuts. So if somebody wants to choose an alternate food, they should just let me know or let us know. And then we do a tech talk. Duncan McMillan suggested that we prepare for, we could hone our message passing skills because, because specs and RACES have very precise requirements for message passing, and this might be a good thing for us to review. And they're actually hosting a practice session for message passing in April. And so this might form the basis of the next meeting's discussion. So I throw that out there and think about it. There are other, I know we've run a poll for,
The results of the poll
are going to be in here. Yeah, okay. So we're good. So with that, I'm going to be quiet and turn it over to Neil
There's still a mic.
and get rid of the mic.
And can we do next? Oh, actually, before I forget, you can do next slide, but there's a sign up sheet. If you're not on the mailing list, please make sure your email address is there and legible, and I will add you. And if you don't want to decide until later, there's a link on the lahams.com website that will let you sign up. Okay.
One string, Neil?
Hmm?
No alien channels, is that one string?
Yes. No punctuation, no.
All right.
So let's see. As someone famous whose name Mark Twain said, I didn't have time to do a short presentation, so I did a long one. So I can give the next thing fairly fast or in more detail, and I'm open to what people here want. I basically stole lock, stock, and barrel the entire presentation about repeaters from the county Introduction to Emergency Communications class with their permission. And I think it gives a fantastic introduction to repeaters if you didn't really know what they were or understand it very well. But it takes about 20 minutes to get through. And I don't know if people want to sit through 20 minutes of repeater talk or not. I can also gloss over it and just give the high points and leave all the stuff in the presentation, which is available to everyone on the web. So do people have a preference either way? Okay. Well, if I see people poking their eyes out, I'll know it's taken too long. Go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So this is one of their requirements, giving them credit that this all came from them. And if you haven't taken it yet, I really, really strongly recommend the intro, and there's another one. They're both emergency communications. One's intro, the other's fundamentals. And they're a great introduction if you didn't know what's going on. Yes.
So these acronyms have been mentioned several times, but what is ARES and RACES?
Amateur Radio Emergency Service, which is a function provided by the ARRL, which is the Amateur Radio Relay League, okay, which is like a 501c3 that you can join to advocate for amateur radio. RACES is a government thing, Radio Amateur Communications Emergency Service. And so if you're actually in an emergency with the declared activation by your local jurisdiction or a non-local jurisdiction, that brings RACES into effect. And so there's a separate set of FCC rules and regulations covered by RACES. Most groups combine them both and do ARES for drills and RACES for activations, and it's all one thing. By the way, Larry used to be the section emergency coordinator for the county, so he has a lot of insight on this.
One of the things I learned that was intriguing to me is that RACES actually started in World War II. At that time, only ham radio operators who were authorized under RACES were allowed to use communications because all communications were regulated because of the war. So for many years after that, that same restriction applied, but then the idea of having very knowledgeable ham radio operators interested in helping started becoming attractive to the cities, counties, and states, and that's how we got RACES at the level we have now.
Okay, next slide. So there's basically two ways. So there's a lot of simplification I'm going to do. So when I say two ways, there's two plus a gazillion more. But you know, flying at 10,000 feet, there's two ways people use radios. One is simplex. Everyone's on the same frequency. Only one person could be talking at a time. If more than one person's talking at a time, they just interfere with each other. You can't hear when someone else is talking. The other one is duplex. And the difference is you transmit at one frequency, sorry, this one, and you receive on a different one. And the thing that does that in the middle is a repeater. So it actually has two radios, one that's listening on one frequency, one that's transmitting on another. And it takes the ones it receives on one frequency and sends them back out the other frequency. And we'll talk later why that's useful and what it benefits for you. But that's the basic difference between simplex and repeater or duplex.
Actually, that is considered half duplex, not full duplex.
Yes, that's true. But can we?
You can have more than one person talking at the same time, but you're unlikely to understand either of them.
Next. So this is what simplex looks like, and I'm not going to beat this to death, but you basically transmit on a frequency and the other guy's listening on the same frequency. If you're using a handheld, you have 1 to 5 watts, you can typically get 1 to 7 miles of range. And this is them answering, same frequency, other side transmitting, the other guy listening. So you're listening and talking on the same frequency. That's, if you have to take one thing away, that's what simplex is. Next. So unfortunately, simplex, when it works, is wonderful, and when it doesn't work, is less than wonderful. And so if there's buildings in the way, if there's a mountain between you and you don't have line of sight, other types of things, the range is reduced a lot. Next slide. So what people do is they typically stick on the top of a really high hill or some other place with really good coverage, one of these receive and transmit radios called a repeater that can help the two sides talk for much further. Next slide. So, so this basically is repeating what I already said, and I'm not going to get into duplex or half duplex. And we've said all of this. And the other thing I want to point out is offset, which we'll come back to, but that's the difference between the transmit and the receive frequency is called the offset. So, and there's a whole convention for what that offset is and how you specify it, and we'll be talking about that in about 3 slides. So love how the people did the animation here. So they're transmitting on this frequency, and then they're receiving on this frequency, and you get, instead of 7 miles, you get up to 50-ish, very ish. A lot of it depends on, line of sight, hills in the way, what power you're transmitting in, and how high your antenna is. Yes, Larry?
I ran a test in Nevada one time from Peosh to that, Battle Mountain is about 200 miles and very easily talk to a ham at that location. So it enormously depends on what it is between you and me.
Right. And the example I use is I was net control for Pathways Run, and I thought, oh my God, I'm worried about not being able to receive people. So I took a slightly bigger than normal antenna and put it on a little mast and set up, and could not hear anyone because I was picking up Auburn. There's some repeater on the other side of the Central Valley that was drowning out everyone else. So anyway, go ahead. Next slide, please.
What's the next slide? Yeah, it's responding now.
Is it there now?
Yeah,
I'm sorry, it looks too much. Oh, sorry, it's just
Yeah, it looks
going
good.
back the other way, the frequencies are swapped. That's the one thing to note. Next slide. So this is the kind of thing you will see all the time. Should have brought a pointer. So you'll see something like the repeater name, which is N6NFI in this example, the frequency, which is the frequency you listen on or the repeater transmits on, a negative or a positive, which is the offset, and there's conventions that we'll talk more about, and then usually one more number, which is the tone frequency, called a PL tone or a CTCSS tone, which don't ask me what that stands for. And so these 3 pieces of information is what you need to do to program it into your radio and communicate. Next slide. So we already said this, that's the output frequency that you receive. Next slide. So repeater offset, this is probably the most important slide in the presentation because this confuses folks. So there's a convention that it's typically plus or minus a given number of kilohertz or megahertz, but that depends on what band the repeater is in. So in VHF, or 2 meters, it's typically 600 kilohertz. So negative offset will be 600 kilohertz lower, positive offset, it will be 600 kilohertz higher. In UHF 70 centimeter, it's 5 megahertz. And in 220 or 1.25 meters, it's 1.6 megahertz. So if you just see a plus or minus, that's the number of megahertz it's going to be. Most radios have this hard-coded into it. Okay, but sometimes it's a non-standard offset, like 800 kilohertz or some other number, and you will just have to, every radio has a way of doing it, and every radio has a different way of doing it. So it doesn't happen often, but there are a few repeaters out in our local area that have non-standard offsets. And so if it's standard, you'll typically just see a plus or minus, and that's it. And once again, if it's a negative, the frequency will be the one you receive on. And then if negative means you go down 600 kilohertz or 5 megahertz for the frequency you need to transmit on. Next. So I think this is just restating everything. So next. So the other thing that happens is there's, hope this is still more offset example. So the next one is tone. What's tone? There's only so many frequencies out there. And remember how I said there was an Auburn repeater that I was picking up? Well, they add an extra frequency, subaudible, filtered out by the radio, so you don't hear it. There's about 30-ish, 35-ish, I forget exactly how many there are, different frequencies you can have, and the repeater will not turn on its output unless you have the right tone there. So N6NFI is programmed with a 100 hertz PL tone. Unless it hears that 100 hertz tone, it will not send what it's receiving to the transmitter. And so that way you can have two different faraway repeaters that won't pick up everyone else's traffic. If they're very close to each other, you'll still have interference because someone is transmitting on that channel. And even if the output's not on, the repeater that you're trying to get to is going to hear that other transmitter also. But it reduces the number of interfering signals that you get. Next slide. So this is mostly a repeat, subaudible tone, filtered out, 40 discrete values. There's a whole separate system called DCS, ham radio, which is entirely equivalent to CTCSS, but different.
So this is a constant tone underneath your transmission, not like a leading.
Correct, correct. The entire transmission will have that tone, and you will never hear it. Okay, and this applies to Kenwood and Yaesu and ICOM, but most people have Baofangs, I'm guessing. And so they are, again, they have a way of doing it. Baofangs have, once you get your head around it, it's not hard to program. And that might even be a whole session we just want to have, how to program your Baofeng. But it's different and more complicated than all the others, and it really helps to have a cheat sheet. Next. So this is just repeating with pictures what I said. If you don't have the 100 hertz PL tone, it won't transmit on the output frequency. Next. And if you do have 100 hertz, it will. Oh. Andy, can you sign in? Thank you. Next. So there's one more thing that is not commonly used. It says this is changing, but I'm not sure why. Is not only can we have the repeater look for that tone and not open up it, not transmit on its output if that tone's not there, you can also set your radio to listen for that tone and not have your speaker turn on unless you see that tone. Okay, and so that's, I mean, it turns out that's, I know we're not talking GMRS yet, but GMRS has the same kind of thing where you have a privacy tone and you can hear it if the person's sending the right privacy tone. The reason why we don't do that is you don't know if someone else is transmitting typically, because your speaker is quiet, but someone else is transmitting without the PL tone you're listening for. And therefore you just will start transmitting over them.
They don't. Two transmitters transmitting different PL tones can't, they won't work at the same time. It's squashing. It's not.
That's right. Because it's not like you can listen for your PL tone and just pick up that signal. It's just, they'll just step on each other.
So the repeater is sending this tone as well on its transmission.
Sometimes. That's programmable on the repeater. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't.
And the reason you'd have your receiver require that tone from the repeater is to prevent someone else who might be sending out on that frequency.
I'm saying it because it's something that the radios do. It's typically not done. Okay, because in my opinion, at least, the problems are bigger than the benefits. Okay, and the biggest one being almost always you're trained to listen to see if the channel is clear and then transmit if it is. And if you have tone squelch, which is what this is called, then that breaks that paradigm.
Two comments. Commercial radios, they have a on-hook situation. You take your rig off, the microphone off. And if someone is transmitting with a different PL, you can hear it only then. But the other thing is, lately, for the parades downtown, when you're on Simplex.
I'm going to get that in a second.
Oh, okay.
So you look like you had something to say, or no? Sorry, You're just attentively looking and I overinterpreted.
So this is like really helpful for me. It's been decades.
So how do you know if, so I need to know if that repeater is gonna send this right, or if I'm gonna turn the filter on, I better know if the repeater's sending it.
No, because you can just ignore it and
I
not,
can always listen without the filter, but if I turn it on, I need to know that repeater uses it.
yeah. And it's typically this, typically, although it doesn't have to be the same frequency that you use when transmitting. It actually can be a different
The
frequency.
repeater can add it to the signal that it got from the transmitter.
Right, typically done at the repeater controller, not the repeater, but that's a level deeper than where we are today. Questions before I move on? Okay, so I will say tone squelch is not very commonly used. Los Altos Festival of Lights came up with a very creative use for it, which is not like this at all. So everyone is programmed with tone, a different tone in simplex. So everyone who's operating on the parade has a different tone that they transmit. And they started doing that because every year they had someone with a stuck mic and they couldn't tell who it was. And you can't really use the radio to communicate if there's a stuck mic and try to work it out. So this way, since everyone has a different tone, they can tell, oh, tone 123 is transmitting. Look it up on my sheet. That's John Doe. Okay, I know where John Doe is supposed to be. I'm going to send someone down there to have a chat with them.
So your receiver will show what tone is being.
Not well. So they have special equipment that they made a little bit of hardware. A lot of Baofangs and other radios, you can program it to search for which tone is being transmitted, but it's not as efficient as their custom little dongle. But it's I thought it was a very creative use of tone, different than everything you're going to see here. Next. So this is basically going to say the same thing, only instead of being blocked here, it's being blocked there. It's not really blocked, it's just the speaker's not turned on. Maybe you think of that as blocked. Next. Yeah, so the other reason they mention it is if you accidentally set tone squelch, right, then your radio is going to behave very mysteriously if you're not getting that tone. So in your checklist of things to go debug, we're trying to raise your consciousness. This is one more thing in the chain of things that might keep your radio from working properly that you should at least consider if, as you're trying to debug why it's not working. And this gives some hints that I'm not going to go talk through, but it's in the slides. And I absolutely second the bottom one. Unless you know what you're doing, don't do this. Next. So this is how you would store your radio, how you would program your radio. So I'm not going to read it step by step. It's pretty clear. Next. And then this is going through again for a repeater. You have to do the base frequency, you have to do the offset, and then you have to do the PL tone. And then you don't have to store it in memory, but if you're doing more than one thing, it's really nice to have it in memory so you don't have to reprogram it over and over and over. Next. Okay, so that was my, I don't know how long it was, probably.
23 minutes.
So it's on repeaters, and I'm going to pause there and see if there are any questions. Okay, was that? Don't know how I set alarm. So was that a good level of I'm trying to tune what I do for future.
Because it kind of gives you an overview and then you can drill down maybe that another meeting or something on some areas that there's some common interest.
Okay, and so I just want to reiterate this was taken directly out of the county class, which I think they do a fantastic job of putting things together. And I encourage you to go to the class, and if I can't get you to go to the class, at least look at the slides. They really do try to answer a lot of questions.
Question, do they have that, do you have to physically still go to the class or so they don't have it like online or Zoom even?
No, nor do they record them. Well, in particular, it's all the things you need to do to be an emergency communicator in the county. And I'm skating at a very high level, but they cover how to be a net control, how to pass messages, how to be a field communicator, how to be a shadow. So they put together what they call a credentialing program, which, you looking for the bathroom?
I gotta leave, I have any coffee.
Thank you for coming. So they have a whole credentialing program where you get to show that you know these skills, and then if you're part of mutual aid, you can actually go not just in Los Altos Hills, but any city in the county that participates in the program, which is all of them, I think.
A lot of this club is about supporting the emergency aspect of having the equipment. Because some people had the expectation that we could dabble in that or occasionally participate. Is this class you just referenced the requirement to enable us to participate, or can we participate without a certificate, or I mean, where's the boundary?
If I could require it, and people would do it, I would require it because I think it's a great prep. There's been a lot of resistance to requiring it, so we don't. Okay, but I think it means we have people who are less well prepared than they could be.
And then just real quick, is this like an 8-hour class? Is this like a class over 2 months? Is this like a 3-hour? I mean,
It's a series of like 15 different classes. Each of them are about 3 hours.
oh, so it is substantial.
Usually on Saturday.
And if you go to scc-aries-races.org, this one here, and I'll mail out these slides. So there's a training and events link in the upper left that will show all the classes upcoming. And there's a separate section of the website that lets you see all the PDFs. Yes, Larry.
When I was running the county program, I was fortunate to have a couple of fellows who didn't have jobs at that time and were looking for things to do, and so they created the program. The reason I bring that topic up was that they were very effective at focusing this as levels. You have an entry level where you are a ham radio operator available to respond. You could move up from a field responder to operating in a major emergency with the skill set changing. And so the 15 classes that were talked about would raise you up in the system to a higher and higher level. To be a communicator at the level that would be required here in town, it was, as was commented, there are introductory classes. There are 3 hours, I think, a piece for this early introduction portion of the program. And I agree. I think those are, for a ham who has a radio in front of him that says, what do I do with this now? That becomes a very valuable way, a much quicker way to do that than trying to do it without having somebody hold your hand.
Okay. So, thank you. Anybody else have a question before I move on to the wrap-up portion of the deck? And I appreciate everyone's patience for all this. I'm not going to go through these one by one. I don't know if people are willing to, but I find the meetup group, there's a guy named Steve Ossenberg, who's a SPECS board member, who's been putting a lot of effort in getting all the events that are happening nearby into that meetup group. So if you just want to know about other events that are going on, whether or not you're going to sign up, that's probably one of the best places right now to just be able to passively monitor what's going on. And again, all these links will be in the deck, and I'll send them out later today. Next. So the other thing people asked about in the first meeting is starter radios. And I'm going to tell you that, like all opinions, people have many of them. So this is my take on what I find important. You ask 3 hams, you'll see a large, not overlapping set of things that they care about. I am not going to read them off. They're all here, but it's basically better than the oh, actually I brought one. Better than a lousy antenna, than most of the antennas that come with the Baofangs. Who had a Baofeng and was holding it up? So that antenna is, shall we say, not great.
Yeah, it's not great. It's like stock option, right off the lot.
So you can buy for about $10, a better one closer to resonant on 2 meters and 440. And it gives you about twice the effective power. And you can make it twice again by doing what's called tiger tail, which is a length of wire as long as this that just dangles off the bottom. Ease of programming, and very important, because if you can't program your radio, you will never, you'll never actually use it because it will be too hard. There's two things out there, software, commonly done software. Many manufacturers have their own very proprietary, typically horrible programming software. There's Chirp, which is an open source programmer that works across probably 100 different radios. That's what I recommend and use. And then what's the commercial one? I forget their name. Anyway, there is a commercial one that for $50 a radio, they will sell you a cable and a programming kit, and you'll be able to program that radio. I have enough different radios. $50 a radio really bothers me. It's more than the radio.
So there's Chirp.
So it turns out there's different cables for every manufacturer, although there's a few that are common across many ones, like the one Baofeng uses, which is the one Kenwood did, has like 80% of the market, and then there's a bunch of people who have proprietary ones. Turns out there's only one or two different electrical levels that are used. So people sell multi-radio kits that, for like $15 on Amazon, it will do, 8 different connectors. Okay, or you can buy one custom to your radio. Again, the buy-in, many of the kits, so I'm going to use terms probably that I get to on the next slide. A kit is like the radio and a bunch of stuff, right? As opposed to the bare radio. And most kits will have a programming cable, not all, but most. So that's one other thing you can look for. Some radios let you charge by USB. The one I'm going to hold up here has that, which is convenient because it's one less extra custom thing you have to lug around. A handset or an earbud, which is here. And this handset and most handsets have a little plug on the side where you can put an earpiece in. And the reason why you really want that is if it's loud out, if you're at a parade, something else, you will not be able to hear the radio. And if you turn it up loud enough to hear the radio, you're bothering everyone else around you. If you're like in a meeting with, not a meeting, but in a place with other people who aren't doing radio, and here you are distracting them all. So it's really useful to be able for you to hear it without bothering everyone else. And finally, I'll throw out a pet peeve of mine is firmware upgradability. Radios are not perfect, and they're basically mostly software. And Baofengs especially are not upgradable. And some of the other major manufacturers aren't either. And the last one I'll throw in is a mount for your car. So when you take a radio in your car and you're trying to just transmit, you're in this Faraday cage, basically. Faraday cage is something that blocks radio signals. And so in order for you to hear and talk, it's useful to have an antenna on the top of the car, typically magnet, and it's called mag mount because it magnetically mounts to the top of the car, and then connects to your radio. There's other ways of mounting it also. Mag mounts are nice for the people who didn't want to always have it permanently mounted.
And sometimes you have a car that doesn't have magnet, which I found out everywhere.
Yeah, you aluminum car people.
Yeah,
Plastic.
you might consider that those SNA connectors on the radios, they don't last forever. You keep turning, disconnecting and reconnecting, you'll wear them out.
Yep, they're good. They're rated for 500 insertions. Next.
Question. Andrew, actually, never mind. It's on this slide.
So here are at least the ones that I put out there for people to go look at. There will be lots of people who say only buy ICOM or, one of the 3 name brand Japanese manufacturers. For your first radio, my personal style is go cheap, go disposable, figure out what you like and don't like, and then you can get a better one later and keep the other one and leave it in your car. So
You're serious? You buy a whole radio for $20?
less than $20.
This is the UV5R. I think my dad paid more for it because it's a little older, but yeah, they're cheap.
God, these things have crashed. I remember at like 400, 500.
Oh,
bucks
yeah,
for a
I mean, when I
Sandbox.
was, this guy's age here, I mean, it was a real investment, so. Yeah, it's a little inscrutable. I'm working on it, like 40 minutes on YouTube. I'm still like, how exactly you program this thing? Sure.
So literally I went to Amazon, it was $20 and $21. So at that point, I consider that a low enough bar that, just try one. Try one, and if you use it for 2 hours, you will know what drives you nuts. So I prefer the 82 over the 5R. There's almost no price difference. It's got a louder speaker. It's got a better battery. It's got 2 different transmit buttons, one for each band. Up to you. A lot of people just recommend, stick with the name brands. And I will say, and I'll leave it out for anyone who wants to look at it, this is my current favorite starter radio, it's from a company called TID Radio. It has Bluetooth. You can if you get their app, you can program it from your phone. You can program the whole list from your computer. It's USB-C chargeable. It comes with everything in the bag, which is most of the stuff you need to get started, and it's $70 for the kit.
And you can plug the remote mic in it. It's got all that.
So
What's the word? Is it TID radio or is it?
all one word, TID Radio. And again, I'll let people look at it, but it's got like a real screen instead of a 2-line alphanumeric display. So my eyes are going. So I really, really appreciate having bigger print. I'm finally not the youngest person in the room, so.
You're younger than me, so you're young.
Yeah, this is my joke. I joined Ham Radio because I wanted to be the youngest one in the club again. So next. Okay, so I'm going to change subjects unless people want to ask questions about radios.
I just want to comment on the stock full-frame radio antenna. After a few minutes, the base of it is going to get hot and your signal is going to drop off.
So you're absolutely, I don't disagree. Again, if you're mostly listening, it kind of is sort of acceptable, but there's definitely reasons to get a better radio. I mean, a better antenna.
What kind of range did TID radio get versus the $3?
So transmit range is almost the same for all of them, because there's most of the hard part isn't the transmitter, it's the receiver. With that said, I'm going to leave out the whole who's got too many harmonics and which bands. That's cheap radios sometimes don't meet FCC standards for keeping your transmit frequencies in the range that it's supposed to be in. They've gotten better, but it still catch can. But the receivers are where, previous page, if you can go back, if not, fine. The receivers are generally where these guys, the name brands, are better. So they will be able to pick signals out that you will not be able to receive on a Baofeng.
And then kind of local repeater-based environment.
Well, I mean, it's all an edge case. So if you can, if your cheap radio can hear it here, your expensive radio probably can. But if you go another couple of miles away, right, then only the good radios will do it.
I have kind of a quasi dumb question, but that's okay. Remember Bob, he liked to have all the gadgets. I think we've got handhelds from just about every manufacturer. Well, I might be exaggerating, but is there ever a point where it's time for a garage sale of those, or you donate them to Indonesia?
So I wasn't prepared for a therapy session.
No, I mean, I'm just wondering, I guess my bottom line question is there a point where you kind of want to stay current? You know, don't drive the 1950 car, drive the 1970s or something.
Yeah. I mean, it's just such a personal thing, right? I don't see how one could answer it for someone else. It's, you know, most people can only use one or at most two radios at a time, right? You know, and then you might leave one in each car, kinds of other things. But whatever your requirements are, if you have more radios than that, right, and a spare or two, you have enough.
I was asking more from a vintage standpoint. That if you have a radio that's from 20 years ago, is it best to stay current with whatever the latest technology
Are there
is?
any features missing from?
So I will say we have what is the ICOM radios that everyone has? Yeah, W32s. Those are bricks, really heavy. They have NiCod batteries and not a good display, and don't do UHF and VHF at the same time. RF-wise, they are wonderful. Probably better than today's radios in terms of the quality of the receiver and the transmitter. So, you know, until the capacitors leak out, right, old radios are really good. But if you want some of the features like a nice clear display and displaying the repeater name as well as the frequency, only new radios are going to do that.
I have one in my trunk that's got thumb wheels on it still. That my dad often tweets me, yes, it's like 1984. And that one's even more inscrutable than this one.
I had one of those.
Anyway, I don't know if that's responsive or not, but
No, I'm looking at my garage and there's a bunch of, like 5 or 10 antennas of various vintage and, Bob's collection of radios and I'm trying to move to a more simplistic life of maybe one radio that might work that does a core beat like the ICOM does on the desk, that kind of thing. So just looking for simplify.
So I have a Yaesu 2 meter, which is pretty old, and it restricts you to the legal band in the US. The Bofang doesn't do that.
correct.
And for a new ham, you really have to get that radio programmed to use it right, I think.
Don't mess up.
Yeah, yeah, because you could get onto the aircraft band and start transmitting.
Anyway, we've had this discussion, so yeah.
So I know, Neil, that you've said for CERT, we have a set list of things that we're programming with those radios. I wonder if that would be something that would be worthwhile.
So we've done that before for CERT, and I think it would be a very reasonable thing to do in the social period of one of these things, where I'll bring my massive cables, and if people tell me which radios they have, we can program the standard frequencies into anyone's radio who they want. I'll tell you, we take over at least 1 to 20. We ask you to save that for us so that we can just say, go to channel 8, go to channel 2, and it will be the same on everyone's radio. It's not a requirement, but I think it makes interoperability from people who are, aren't experts much easier.
Do you have this list published anywhere?
Yes, it's part of if you go to the ECC page of the town website, look for the quick reference guide, and there's Appendix F, which is the frequency list. I'm hoping I'm remembering that right.
That's scary.
Anyway.
Just real quickly, my old ICOM radio could hear the GMRS, but wouldn't let me transmit on it. It's similar to somebody else in here. Will these newer, cheaper ones let you transmit on those GMRS?
Yes.
Because that pissed me off. I'd go with a group of young kids backcountry skiing. They all had GMRS radios. But I got this super expensive fancy thing, I can hear them.
Well, some of that is because it used to be illegal,
Yeah, I know, it used to be like,
but now that you can transmit with a removable antenna on GMRS, I think it's not illegal anymore to use your ham radio.
So pretty much, let me follow up on that, because that was from my question. Would any of these standard, I know Baofangs are pretty liberal, they do, won't any of these let you work GMRS at the same time?
Yes. So Baofangs and Baofeng derived ones, yes. As he says, the ICOM, Yaesu, Kenwood is almost out of the HT business. Many of their radios don't let you transmit outside of the ham bands.
You can hear. Is it worth, and this is getting ahead to the discussion, we don't have it now, but 'cause I see they have combo radios, is it something worth having to be able to have simultaneous abilities?
Let's save that for the discussion. It is, again, not a bad question, but I'm trying to get to the end of this. Can you go to the next slide? Oh, any other questions about starter ham radios? I know we did a bunch of them. Okay, so, oops. Hi, Art. I don't know if I'm unmuted enough for Art.
Hi there, how are you?
Oh, it works, amazing. So can you move Art down just a little bit?
Sure.
So thank you everyone who filled out the survey. I went and arbitrarily tried to mush all the high, medium, lows down into something I could rank. So I gave highs 3 points, mediums 2 points, lows 1 point, and negative 2 points. It's arbitrary, it's what I did. Here's how things ranked. And I won't read them off, but I was thinking, I know Duncan proposed message passing. I wanted to at least put out there that's not on this list that people kind of came up is how to program your Baofeng as, you know, a more proximate thing. And I would cover both chirp and manually programming a repeater. Yeah, for topics for future meetings.
Some of us
Don't have.
changes anyhow. I mean, we're not using one of the, Los Altos is using one of the alternate. Keep it. We used to use it.
Right, but if you ever go to another jurisdiction, they say, here's our frequency, right? And you don't know how to program your radio, you're not 100% useful, shall we say very politely?
both the Baofeng and the TDI read, we both use the chirps stuff, or they
So almost every radio, so you should go look at chirp.danplanet, but there's literally 100 radios, including almost all the popular ones.
we don't have to care about. Pick the one that makes us happy, not worry about it.
Well, I have to admit, I check chirp first before I buy a radio, because I really don't want to. And the nice thing is, while you can't take your programming for one radio and directly apply it to the other, because there's extra stuff that needs to be set up right, you can copy and paste from one radio to another and therefore keep all the same channels. But it turns out when you, in the guts of chirp, it knows custom things for each radio. So for example, Baofengs, you can set channels to no transmit, so they're receive only. But many other radios don't let you do that. Just as a little example of things that are different from one radio to another. Okay, so I think we decided next month it's, you know, programming your radio, and the month after that, maybe message passing. Does that sound good?
The question is message passing, how does that relate to what we saw in the, you know, the radio room this weekend where, you know, form 213, whatever, and so is that what, is that similar to what this would be? Yeah, that's great. Okay, good.
So it's going to be like what I did on Thursday, only, you know, again, and hopefully a little more detailed.
And the class on it is very good. And this thing on the 16th of April, you might as well throw that now. You don't have to be an active participant in that. You can, they have.
Can you say a few more words about what it is? So, because I don't think the people who don't know what you're saying.
Read about, okay. Aries Racing's website has all this information. And on the, what did I figure it out?
Second Tuesday.
Second Tuesday of the month, when they're having.
Oh, no, sorry, third, because we're fourth.
Yeah, the third Tuesday of the month, if they're gonna have it at all, that's where they're at. Not having it in March, they're having it in April. So April 16th is the day, and they do it after all the other nets, so it's a late deal. I think it's
8:30.
something to 9:15. And they publish it ahead, that you sign up for it, if you want to be active participant, or you just show up, and you just listen to what's going on. And they'll have 3 sets of messages. There'll be a sender and a receiver, and the sender, receiver, sender, receiver. And they do a little thing. If they want to cheat, they can cheat, because they do have the messages. Look at them or not look at them. I don't.
So I'm just going to.
It's fun to listen in.
So I'm just going to put in a few words because I think you left out the introduction. I apologize for nitpicking, but so this roughly every month, county, because people were saying we didn't have a chance to really practice or, learn how to do messages well, and there's a lot of complexity in the edge cases. They have a practice net where, as Duncan says, there's a few people who are sending and a few people who are receiving who have signed up to the website to basically use all the message passing rules to send 3 different messages. And then everyone else can listen and try to write it down at the same time. And it really gives you a good feeling for how do you take this abstract knowledge you learned in class and apply it with a real message in a non-emergency, non-stressful, non-graded way.
Same net, just 3 different messages, and three different crews. Message 1 goes, these 2 people send it to you. That's cool.
Okay. So this is people listed other things that weren't on our voting list. These are the things people said, I also have this to suggest, and I want to thank everyone who did that. And I'm just going to leave it up here and let people shout out if any of these resonate with you. Or if you don't know what it is, and ask, and I'll try to decode it.
Well, I tried to get the equipment for packet radio. Looked into it briefly. But I've got an older terminal node controller, MFJ, and I've never been able to figure out how to put it in, even though I've got a stack of Xerox sheets from it. So I don't know, I'd like to put it in operation.
Okay, well, if you already have it, are you a member of Packet at groups.io, SEC Aries Races groups.io? So that's the experts. They're all there, and they are extremely helpful if you give them a focused question.
Is there a current application?
Yes.
I remember right, and I might have the wrong, I may not be Packet Radio. This was the deal where you take the sound out of the radios to get into the sound card, and there's some software grabbed it, and made it like a terminal. What is that? What do people do with it other than just silly fun thing? Is there like a genuine use?
I just want to add that one of the things we did on Saturday, seeing the EOC, I knew nothing was going on, so I started from zero knowledge. Seeing them pass messages audibly and trying it out, which has its own complexities, was really interesting. And then seeing a packet radio, which I've never heard in my life, I'm amazed we're not doing more with packet radio, because the speed at which things are being sent over audibly is just so much slower compared to essentially sending email. So I'm not quite. It's amazing that more stuff is done packet wise. I was really impressed that just an old Windows 7 machine, and box. It just happens. Meanwhile, we're, as opposed to sending 5 words at a time for message and waiting for audio feedback. I'm like, I don't know why during emergencies, packet wouldn't be the absolute fastest way to do things.
Well, it's 2 to 5 times faster than voice and amazingly slow compared to like Wi-Fi. So,
You have to kill it. Yeah.
well, so I'll freely admit, it's no secret. I would like to have the town not depend on ham radio in an emergency. I realize this is the ham club, but I think between Starlink and regular internet providers and a custom Wi-Fi network in the county, right? If you give me 3 different IP paths, I'm willing to believe that, all 3 aren't going to go down at the same time if we harden them all. And so if we can get all of that working, and we haven't yet, but it's under discussion, then we don't need packet radio because that's really slow and especially unencrypted. So if you want to log into WebEOC, which if I was the emergency manager in town would be very high on my list, I need something that I can encrypt traffic on.
But the microwave net would be another way to get on the network.
Right. So that was the Wi-Fi custom backbone.
Okay.
Just one comment, and I'm not being political. The bottom line, like 20 years ago when we all started, was that the ham radio was when everything else, Vestware came in. We have some, AT&T is up against the same battle right now. They want to get rid of the landline. But last winter, for instance, up at Mount Shasta, where my son's at our place, none of the cell phone stuff worked, none of the electricity worked, nothing worked. And snow was up to here, and he was trying to get, emotional reassurance, and the only way he could get through was on the landline phone that we kept it up there. And so I think there's obviously new developments technologically, much newer, much more like what you're describing. But I think if we recall that being able to use something that, if everything else fails, you can use, that has a value to it.
So,
and then pan-baked recipes,
yeah.
That's, I presume.
I wonder who submitted that.
I don't know. We started to do a cookbook. Jay, the general manager of the fire district, sent me a nice, so I got like a handful of recipes somewhere on my computer. And once a year we had the ham bake. And for those of us who remember that in the 20 years that we did it, there's something about ham radio operators that they seem to like food. And we got the greatest recipes. His wife had a great recipe that she did. And Barbara's beans, Scott's wife's, the baked beans and stuff. So I have a couple of those recipes. It's kind of like just a fun thing. If anybody wants to help with that or whatever at some point, I've probably got about I don't know, dozen or so.
And separate from the cookbook, sorry, I'll get to you in just a sec, it was traditional in the ECC days to have the December meeting be a potluck, ham bake,
Yeah.
which is where that comes from. And so I am completely open to having our December meeting be that too. So, which you didn't specifically say, but I did.
I'll have a glass of root beer and try to find those stacks where I put the recipes.
Basically, follow up on this discussion, and maybe on the previous slide as a topic, I think maybe it's. I'd love to, not tonight, but to follow up on this conversation of what is the right new technology for people when things go crazy. I mean, there's options. There are pros and cons to that, and ham, pros and cons. Jim, right? I don't know all the things out there. I'd love to have that open conversation just to kind of hear what are the possibilities, so that we can not only bring everyone's ham abilities up to be able to participate in the current emergency operations, but to be able to know what's what we should be stocking up on radio wise or electronics wise, and what we should be sort of helping people push towards.
I'm perfectly, so first of all, I agree, not fighting the concept at all. Should that be more of an EPRC thing than a ham club thing?
Yeah, but this is similar to, I think it's similar to this idea that, oh, with an earthquake country, everybody should have earthquake preparedness book. You know, I mean, if we're ham people in a ham club, maybe just a basic general knowledge of, for example, tree goes down, knocks out all the power lines, I'm stuck up there, can't get out of the road, you know, maybe the cell phone doesn't work. So how can we get contact with somebody who change? I mean, it's something as simple as that. Like, I have a ham radio, but now what do I do?
So that one, I have no problem with living here, and we have a couple of documents already around. But I thought, I interpreted what you said, and maybe I misinterpreted it, as like an emergency communications architecture for the town.
If it's already been taken up with EPRC, I'm happy to leave it there. I'd still like whatever is relevant to this group, because it's sort of all things radio, not just ham. You know, what are the relevant radio technologies that we as homeowners should know about when the shit hits the fan, and power goes down, the cell tower generators run out, and you know, are the ham bands enough? Is there, you know, should I have my personal packet radio? Should I have my Starlink? What should I have as a homeowner?
Right. So I would argue it's, you know, if as a homeowner, what do you want to do in an emergency? Right. You know, and how does ham play a role in that? Perfectly in charter for this one. I would argue, and this is just my opinion, that, you know, the architecture for the town, that what it should do for communication in an emergency, that's more of an EPRC thing.
Absolutely. I'm thinking it as I appreciate you're drawing a line there, because we don't want anyone else sort of feeling like we're crossing the streams there. But I think that you're having mentioned that in terms of, you know, is ham the future, is Starlink the future for, you know, I went and got my ham cram to get my license, so I'd have something for an emergency for myself. And I still don't know if it's the right thing to have in a modern world or not. So just hearing everyone's feeling, I don't think there's a right answer. I'm just interested in hearing feelings about what they know about this or where they see it going. I think it's an interesting conversation.
Okay.
So relative to just the ham aspect, there's a set of procedures. If you get on the repeater right now, it'll be dead. Nobody's there. Heavy rain, when do you want to meet up? You know, Larry actually set some of this up with CERT last time. And we need to, I think within this group, it'd be a perfect place to talk about how the ham club would react with CERT to deal with those sorts of issues. I agree entirely that the town is an official thing. That's the EPRC. I would welcome your contribution though, because it's a big, hairy problem, and we're trying to figure out even how to get a toehold in it.
So this, your first item on the list there, would that cover those entry level topics?
That's what I was wondering. I was sort of wondering what that would cover.
Or what does it?
Well, that's what you mean by it.
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand the question, but let me give you sort of a half answer, which is that CERT has a set of procedures that they will go through after an earthquake. Okay. There's no reason why there was a secret. That's limited to CERT on that, and we'd be happy to share those procedures with this group.
They're already public.
Yeah, and during the last year's atmospheric river storms, we discovered that we had a whole set of weaknesses on what to do with that. I think we put together a proposal for how we would handle it, but I don't know that it's been published well enough that even the CERTs would know about it. And again, it'd be another thing that we would love to have the hams contribute.
What does the first item on that list?
We don't have more than those words. So
Okay, so
everyone imagined that, you know, emergency preparedness, great. What does that mean? And what, you know?
and like, where is ground? Where's step one? You know,
Well, maybe it's just like, what are opportunities for us too? Like,
No, I mean,
we want to get involved in
literally.
CERT. What does that look like? And, you know,
There's a woman down here who happens to have some insight into that.
I think that you're raising these delineations is good, because there's a lot of confusion
in every department about who's doing what at a certain time, and maybe maybe this is where you make this discussion, but the brainstorming or just understanding of there is the town in an emergency, there is the town, there is CERT, and whose ham-based protocols are in, and correct me if I'm wrong here, are in pursuit of specific goals, setting up ICS, going out and getting information for safety. There's a certain mission there happening using ham radio for other, and maybe what this group is doing is when I walk in this room, I'm thinking I'm here because I'm not, I have connection to CERT, have connection to the town. I'm in this room right now as a homeowner and a resident who wants to be able to communicate and not feel blinded. So I kind of,
That's precisely what I'm
so I'm
asking.
kind of
So-
like, so where do I fit in as a
Where do
homeowner?
we,
So let me try to address it two different ways. Do you want to get in first?
No, I can,
Okay, so there's two different hats that are running out there. So we have a set of procedures written down, appended by reference to the town emergency plan for what are CERTs and ECC, which doesn't exist anymore, but think of that as HAMs. HAMs credentialed and registered with the town. What do you do after an earthquake, which we're authorized to sort of self-activate. I'm not allowed to say self-activate, but it's as close to self-activate as we could get. Well, we can only be activated by an authority. Okay, but written into the town's emergency plan is if you can't get a hold of a town person, we can get a county person who's on call 24/7 to authorize the activation. So it's almost self-activation because we're running all the process, but legally it's not. Okay, sorry, that's a side thing that I'm getting distracted by. So it's a procedure for how do we spin up, and it's called, the first hour after an earthquake. And how do we figure out that we're actually going to activate, and how do we spin people up? How do we get people to open up the radio room and the ARC? And it literally tried to go through, and we've tabletopped it a few times to see what we're missing. Okay, but that's for credentialed people, credentialed in the sense of you are actively assisting the town with a known role and you're a DSW registered person. Okay.
Say what DSW means.
Disaster service worker - volunteer. Right. So that's what we have. So the question is, you as a homeowner, what do you there's nothing formal we're going to tell you to do. And we really don't want you to hop on the repeater because we're busy using it for our stuff. So what we really want you to do is become a CERT so you can contribute.
at the beginning, that class, with the Saturdays, the 3 hours, that would enable somebody living here to then be directly involved in that. Okay.
Or to go through the CERT path.
last year, I got involved in developing a way for our ham radio operators to at least exchange, yeah, I'm still around, the tree's still upright, or no, it isn't, with a 9 a.m. net, that it would be open to whoever wanted to check in who had a ham radio. And the logic was, we would come up every morning at 9 o'clock, one of us, and it was usually me, during the middle of any significant weather condition. And I mean, it wasn't just drizzle. It was when we had the super windstorm type thing. But the reality was, it doesn't have to happen all the time. But it was very important to one of the people who had no cell phone, no landline, no internet, and no other way but ham radio to say, hey, I'm okay. And so I'm very interested in reestablishing that, with the idea that, of course, you say, well, how do you know it's on or not? And my suggestion is that we have either a text mail notification before the event saying, starting Monday, we will do every 9 o'clock in the morning check. And anyone who wants to state what's happened at their location. It was important also that you tell us tell me or whoever is doing my position, what happened at your location? Because otherwise the town has no real way of knowing unless they get their 5 people out surveying the town about what tree is down and where is it type thing.
Well, I think there are other communication needs from people who are not involved in certain mission at the time. So I don't even know what question to ask. I don't have a goal here, by the way, so I'm not, I don't want to take this off the rails, but I used to have a landline until I finally realized this is pointless, and I see AT&T in the paper last week saying we want to drop them. So that's what used to be a last gasp emergency communication technique is now dead. That's why I kind of moved over to ham. And that's what I'll be able to somehow communicate with. I'm not quite sure how, not quite sure who. And so I'm interested in all these techniques as a homeowner resident. While I'm also out with CERT as well and helping out with town stuff. But so that's what I know. These aren't real specific questions, but I think the interest in communication methods that are going to exist when the power goes out is what I'm really interested in.
You don't need to be a CERT to do that. There's absolutely no reason why you have to be a DSW. So how I look at it is similar to how Neil looks at it. So we have people who would basically be in their homes communicating over the ham computer, right? With permission and the correct credentialing to do that. When it starts to change is when you leave your house and you are coming to an area, right? That's when we want to have coverage for you if you're going to be in the field. So our CERT recon team is how I look at a field ham. Right, you guys are, the CERT recon team will go out and they'll do damage assessment for us as CERTs, right? And their main communication is through radio. Now, I'm of the thought process where there are ways that we can work around some of that DSW coverage. We can make people spontaneous volunteers for the day. So should you decide, hey, I do want to come help now, I'm at home, ham, I called in, hey, I do want to help. There's ways that we can make you a DSW and get you that coverage if you come out to the field. But I would definitely support having something like the ECC used to do, but obviously it's not a committee that doesn't have to necessarily be a DSW. Just let me know if I'm talking out of line, but I don't see a reason why. Yeah, we could. Yeah, don't tell HR. Any reason why we couldn't definitely entertain that, because I think ham is very important. I think there is definitely some people that we need to be able to communicate with, and that does concern me a lot.
So I am trying to translate and just internalize what I'm hearing from folks, and so I'm going to try to echo it back. Please let me know if I'm capturing it right. So we have formal things in town. You're looking for something different than that.
No, I think we don't know what that formal thing is and how we properly with it.
So let me suggest one of the future topics, and I'm looking for advice on where to rank it in the list, is to describe what our current emergency plans are. And then given that, you can decide complete enough, missing big areas, you'd like to do something else. Is that?
What is required of a resident to participate if that time comes? Because now it sounds like there really are.
There's options that,
So anyway, so let me describe what's out there in some future meeting. And then at least we're all starting from a common knowledge set that then we can critique.
Yeah. And I think that first line that was up there on that list
Was that.
should mean that.
Okay.
That should be what that's
Yeah,
about.
so we have a high rating and improvement.
So my question, I'm open to anything, I'm not trying to bias the answer, is we had 2 things we said were the next 2 meetings, was programming your radio and message passing. So this new thing we're talking about, where is it relative to those 2?
I feel it's more than message passing, because I want to know like what roles are there, like volunteering or racing before I get message passing.
I'm not fighting you at all. This is why I'm asking.
Yeah. Does that make sense rationally?
Yeah.
But is message passing something that happens in the emergency arena? And if so, we still don't know what that arena is.
So I hear you saying what he said, right? So you'd like to have the overall architecture first.
As
Yeah.
is an element, you know, of detail and so on and so forth.
I'm fine with that. This is why I'm asking.
I don't know.
Anyone else?
I would put that up there as well, again, for my hidden agenda of wanting to know where does personal hand use fit into that when things happen? And
Yeah.
where does message passing come into personal use? When I'm thinking of the scenario, okay, shit's at the fan. I just want to know, hey, can I get down that road? You know, I don't want to bother CERT while they're in the middle of something, but I got a sort of personal question I want to ask someone, hey, does anyone live over here? You know, how do I do it without interfering?
Yeah.
Or how does a homeowner do it without becoming a DSW and without interfering with DSW work? So I think seeing that framework would help us answer.
Right. I think we're not going to have an answer to that because it's not documented anywhere.
Right.
So I'm happy to talk about what is there and we can say, let's fill some gaps. I don't want to, but I don't want to pretend that we have answers that we don't.
I think from the person who said that being an old process manager for a small company, to get the process, you know, what is it that we have that is official with the town, you know, just like, what is it that we have? What is it that we need? Details of what we need, just going through like a system life cycle type of process, because I think for a lot of us and some of us who've been involved in it for a couple of decades, it's still a little bit of a mystery is with the real official process, please stand up, you know.
Okay. Anyone else want to chime in on this topic? Okay, 2 slides forward. Maybe 1 slide forward. Yep. So with that all said,
Yeah.
who wants to present something? And maybe not this month, maybe not next month, but you know, if anyone's got something they know that they'd like to share, right? It has to be more than the Bill and Neil show.
I know someone who has a really great presentation on the alerts that are available through the county and the town and where to go for good information in an emergency.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. I'm happy to work with you guys on the emergency preparedness presentation too.
Okay, maybe not for a few months, but if you would, that would be great. And the other one I was thinking is,
It wouldn't fill out the entire architecture of emergency communications and planning around town. But one of the things that it does give you is a good indication of where you can go to find out what's going on that's officially produced, right? What's in a wildfire, where do you go for valid wildfire information and not just the bozo down the street or next door or whatever else.
so I just want to interrupt you with a poll, you know, who here knows what Alert SEC is? Seeing several hands that either they're hiding or they're tired. Okay, who is not signed up for Alert SEC? Okay, so
Is that the thing they gave us that's on there?
Yes, that's
the
what
magnet?
it came in
Okay.
zoning, that's zoning even, but Alert SEC was part of that.
Okay, I'm
Yeah.
signing
So-
up for that.
Yeah,
so Zone Haven's different.
yeah, it's,
Oh,
but we had,
Genesis.
when we sent out, when you had that thing sent to you, the 50,000, right? That's not an alert system, but on that same paperwork, we encourage you guys to sign up for Alert SEC, because they don't work together.
I did sign up.
Yeah,
So,
okay, yeah,
so, so I've used the term a bunch. I'm gonna, maybe not necessary because I didn't see any hands go up. But the 15-second description is that's how county and all the jurisdictions in the county reach out to all their people with emergency information that they want to push out.
What alert SCCs? Oh, okay.
It also has reverse 911, but if you've only got cell phones and stuff like that, it doesn't work so well. And if you register with it, you can choose whether you want to get email, text, or phone call. And it is the official blessed way of fire evacuation. They used it a few times in the floods. They used it when they closed Page Mill Road, so on and so forth, for communicating out with residents. We're not exactly sure what percentage of residents our penetration is. We think it might be 25%, but I've heard lots of numbers, bigger and smaller. And so I'm sorry to interrupt. I just want to push it at every opportunity.
25% people have alert SEC on their radar.
Well, have registered with Alert SCC so they can get an email, text, or phone. Did you want to, did I interrupt you and you had more stuff?
Well, I mean, it's the usual Dave and Neil show where I give the first 80%, we make it 80% better.
Okay. Well, anyway, I'm going to continue to poke on things like this because we do need to be, leverage a bigger base of expertise. I think next slide is open mic, but yep. And I know we still haven't finished GMRS, but did anyone else have a topic they'd like to do for open mic?
I have a GMRS related question when we get there.
Okay, well, I think we're there.
Yeah, I never heard of GMRS till tonight. I don't know anything about it. So now what I understand is it's an alternative to ham without as much credentialing. So I'm just interested to learn about it and to understand other politics around it in terms of.
Why don't I drone on for like 2 minutes? And I think I can hit the high points. And I'll talk about what I know about the alternative. So there's 4 basic radios for individuals kind of licenses in the US. There's Family Radio Service, FRS, which are the very low powered, ones that you don't need any license for. They just changed about 3 years ago the rules for GMRS. GMRS is now higher power. You can have repeaters, but it takes a family license. It used to be you could have a license for an organization. You can't do that anymore. So that lets you have a repeater with, we just talked about repeaters. Higher power and a couple of other bells and whistles. It's got 15-ish channels, some of which are shared with FRS. It's in the UHF band, so that kind of gives you an idea of it's going to be a 3 to 4 mile propagation, not get over hills very well, mostly line of sight. The radios are dirt cheap because they've been making them forever. The next one is MERS, something. Yeah, I forget what it is. It's another completely different UHF band that is indistinguishably different, and you don't need a license for, but not many people use.
It's multi-use radio system, and it's in the 2 meter band.
Oh, it's 2 meter? Okay, so it's VHF, Art says. Thank you, Art.
Yep.
And there's just a few channels, right, Art?
5.
Okay.
5, I think.
So the one more thing out there, and then ham radio, which we really haven't talked about all the things ham radio can bring to the party. We've been focusing on VHF and UHF because that's the ubiquitous parts, but it actually gives you a lot more things you could do if you get your license, but you have to pass this 20-odd question test that is a big barrier. So GMRS, very commonly used in the CERT world. So most CERT organizations, I feel very safe saying most, do all of their operations over GMRS. If you're in a flat area, it works pretty well because it will do your 7 miles. In Los Altos Hills, we have a lot of trouble getting from like beyond the same parking lot. So we used to use it, we stopped using it. We had a repeater, actually, I think we still have a repeater, but it's at the arc, so it's in a bowl at the bottom of a hill, so it's not terribly useful. And we basically about 5 years ago decided to go all in on ham. And then, so that's the search side of it. And then there's the ham club side of it, which is the ECC replacement is more about using ham radio to talk from the radio room to the county, as well as monitoring whatever CERT is saying. So was that?
Great, thank you.
Well, and since Art is on,
Yep.
my questions are around the GMRS repeater that they have installed in Los Altos, and what sorts of radios are needed to actually operate with that other than just listening.
That's why I've actually been lurking here in the background. I realized about the time you're meeting that I was too far away to get there in time. So if you can give me a couple of minutes, I'd like to share a couple of things about GMRS. The biggest one is I want to make a plug for the fact that we're doing a communication drill on March 23rd.
I plugged that already.
I'm sorry?
I had a different date, but I did plug your drill in the Resilient Los Altos site.
Yeah, so if you go to the resilientlosaltos.org website, you can find how to do this. This is a listening communication drill. We will be talking on the repeater. And one thing we're trying to find out is, can Los Altos Hills people hear us? Because we are out in the flat, and the question is, how many of the valleys can we get up to so that people can listen to us? So we're going to be
Resilient Los Altos.
broadcasting on the hour at 9:10. I'm sorry, at 9, 11, 1, and 2. And looking for people to tell us how they heard us and tell us either their address or their location so that we can share a map with Los Altos Hills and Mountain View certs to get an idea of how it worked. Many of you probably, it's going to all be, the output's all going to be on channel 2. For those of you with ham radios that can tune there, it's 462.725 megahertz. So it'll be a listening thing. So many of you can listen. And we have some radios, if people want to try it, we can loan you some before that Saturday. So anyway, we'd love to have people up in the hills see if they can hear our repeater, because we'd be happy to help in an emergency, let that work with our repeaters. We have a ham repeater too, but we've decided the way we're organizing is that the ham radios are only going to be used for emergency traffic that's been kind of vetted by the city and the county. The CERT radio repeater is going to be basically for communication among the CERTs, but we're not going to pass any specific information to the EOC or anything like that with the GMRS radios. Anyway, an opportunity to play with GMRS if you want to on the 23rd of March.
Thank you, Art.
23rd, is that what you said?
That's what he said, so I have the wrong date in there.
Frequency is on that website.
Okay, anyone else want to say anything? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, about half the number of people as last time. Hopefully that won't continue as a trend. And I want to thank everyone for showing up. If anyone wants to look at this radio, it's here. Let me turn it on so you can see the display.
It's much prettier than the radio I have. Color display and everything.